Two kids are born in the same hospital, on the same day, in the same city. One will retire a millionaire. The other will work until they're 70 and still struggle to pay rent. And it has almost nothing to do with intelligence, education, or effort. The gap isn't created by what they earn. It's created by something far more invisible. Something hardwired into their brain before they ever see their first paycheck. Welcome to the money mindset trap. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Poverty isn't just about lack of money. It's about lack of mental architecture around money. Rich people don't just have more capital. They have different software running in their heads when they think about risk, time, and value. And that software, it gets installed early by your parents, by your environment, by the financial stress, or lack of it, that surrounded you as a child. In the US and UK, we love the myth of meritocracy. Work hard, get ahead. But the data tells a different story. In America, if you're born into the bottom 20% of earners, you have a 7.5% chance of making it to the top 20%. In the UK, it's around 9%. Compare that to Denmark, where it's nearly 15%. But this isn't just about social mobility. This is about psychology, about the invisible rules that govern how people behave with money. Rules most people never question because they don't even know they exist. Let's break it down. Imagine you're living paycheck to paycheck. Rent is due in 5 days. Your car just broke down. Your kid needs new shoes. Your brain is now in survival mode, and survival mode is terrible for long-term decision-making. There's a concept in behavioral economics called scarcity mindset. When you don't have enough of something, time, money, sleep, your brain becomes hyper-focused on the immediate problem. It narrows your attention. You lose bandwidth. Princeton researchers Sendil Mullainathan and Eldar Shafir studied this. They found that financial stress reduces cognitive capacity by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. That's the difference between average and borderline impaired. You're not dumb. You're just operating with a brain that's overloaded. And here's the cruel irony. The people who most need to make smart financial decisions are the ones whose brains are least equipped to make them. Now contrast that with someone who grew up with financial security. Their brain isn't hijacked by survival. They can afford to think long-term. They can afford to take calculated risks. They can afford to wait. This is the first layer of the trap. Let's talk about marshmallows. You've probably heard of the Stanford marshmallow experiment. A kid is offered 1 marshmallow now, or 2 if they wait 15 minutes. The kids who waited went on to have better life outcomes, higher test scores, better jobs, more wealth. The lesson? Delayed gratification equals success. But here's what they didn't tell you. Follow-up studies revealed something darker. The kids who waited weren't just more disciplined. They were more secure. They came from stable homes. They had learned from experience that adults keep their promises. The kids who grabbed the marshmallow immediately, many came from chaotic environments. They had learned that if you don't take it now, it might disappear. Waiting is a luxury, and trust is a risk they couldn't afford. Your money behavior is shaped by these early lessons. If you grew up in instability, your brain is wired for immediacy. You spend when you have it because you don't believe it'll be there tomorrow. If you grew up in stability, your brain learned that the future is real, that you can plan for it, that sacrifices today lead to rewards tomorrow. This isn't a moral failure, it's neuroscience, and the system punishes you for it. Here's where it gets worse. Being poor is expensive. If you're wealthy, you can buy in bulk. You can afford the upfront cost of energy-efficient appliances. You can pay cash and avoid interest. You can invest in quality items that last. If you're poor, you buy what you can afford right now. Cheap shoes that fall apart in 6 months. Small quantities at higher per unit prices. You pay overdraft fees, payday loan interest, and late payment penalties. This is called the boots theory, famously described by Terry Pratchett. A poor man buys $10 boots that last a season. A rich man buys $50 boots that last 10 years. Over time, the poor man spends far more on boots. In the real world, this plays out everywhere. High-interest car loans, rent-to-own furniture, check cashing fees instead of free bank accounts. The Federal Reserve found that 40% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency without borrowing or selling something. That means millions of people are one flat tire away from financial disaster. Meanwhile, the wealthy accumulate assets. They buy homes that appreciate. They invest in stocks that compound. Their money makes money while they sleep. The gap doesn't just persist, it accelerates. Now let's talk about risk. Rich people are often called risk takers. Entrepreneurs, visionaries, bold. But here's the truth. The wealthy don't take more risk. They take safer risk because they have a cushion. If you come from wealth, you can afford to start a business and fail. You can move across the country for a job opportunity. You can invest in the stock market and ride out a crash. If you're poor, every decision is a gamble with no safety net. Quitting your job to start a business? That's not bold. That's reckless. You have rent to pay, kids to feed, no inheritance to fall back on, so you stay. You take the certain paycheck over the uncertain dream. Behavioral economists call this loss aversion. People feel the pain of loss more intensely than the pleasure of gain. And when you have nothing to lose, that's not true. When you have nothing, every loss is catastrophic. The result? Poor people make conservative choices that look safe in the short term but trap them in the long term. Rich people make aggressive choices that feel risky, but are actually quite calculated. Same game, different starting points, different outcomes. Here's the part no one talks about. Your relationship with money becomes part of your identity. If you grow up hearing we can't afford that, you internalize it. You start to believe that struggling is normal, that wealth is for other people, that wanting more is greedy. Psychologists call this learned helplessness. It's the belief that your situation is permanent and outside your control. And once that belief sets in, it's hard to break. On the flip side, if you grow up around wealth, you absorb a different story. You see money as a tool. You see opportunity as accessible. See yourself as someone who belongs in rooms where deals are made. This plays out in subtle ways. Negotiating a salary, asking for a raise, pitching an idea, taking up space. Studies show that people from lower income backgrounds are less likely to negotiate even when they know they should. Not because they don't deserve more, but because they don't feel entitled to ask. Meanwhile, someone from an upper middle class background negotiates instinctively because they've been told their whole life that their voice matters, that they're worth it. Same skill, same job, different mindset, different paycheck. Let's zoom out. These psychological patterns don't just affect individual decisions. They compound. A poor person avoids investing because it feels risky. They keep their money in a low-interest savings account, if they have one at all. Inflation eats away at it slowly. A rich person invests early. Their money compounds at 7% annually. Over 30 years, a $10,000 investment becomes $76,000 without them lifting a finger. The difference isn't just the initial $10,000. It's the time and the knowledge that investing is even an option. Financial literacy is a privilege, and it's rarely taught in schools, especially not in low-income areas. So the cycle continues, generation after generation. And here's the final layer. The system is designed to keep it this way. Tax codes favor capital gains over wages. The wealthy pay a lower effective tax rate than the middle class. Credit scores punish people for being poor. Miss a payment because you couldn't afford it, your score drops. Now you pay higher interest on everything. Inflation hits the poor hardest. When prices rise, wealthy people own assets that appreciate. Poor people just see their groceries get more expensive. Even geography plays a role. In the US and UK, wealthy neighborhoods have better schools, safer streets, more job opportunities. Poor neighborhoods are food deserts with limited access to banks, healthcare, and transit. You're not just fighting your own psychology, you're fighting a structure that profits from your disadvantage. So here's the question no one wants to ask. If the gap is this deep, this structural, this psychological, can it actually be closed? Some will say yes. Education, opportunity, policy reform. Others will say it's a fairy tale, that the game is rigged, that the starting line determines the finish. The truth? It's probably both. Some people will break the cycle. They'll rewire their brain. They'll learn. They'll take the risk. They'll refuse to accept the story they were handed, but they'll be the exception. And exceptions don't change the rule. The real challenge isn't just helping individuals escape poverty. It's asking whether we're willing to redesign a system that requires poverty to function. Because if wealth compounds and mindset compounds and advantage compounds, then so does inequality. And the gap doesn't just grow. It becomes a canyon. 2 kids, same hospital, same city, same day. One learned that the world is abundant. The other learned that it's scarce. One learned to wait. The other learned to grab. One learned to risk. The other learned to survive. And 30 years later, the distance between them isn't just money. It's a completely different reality. The question isn't whether you can change your money mindset. The question is, do you even know what yours is?